below 500 week for Brady and Danny. Real close, neck and neck. Danny sitting on 109. Brady sitting on 110.
How many picks that is? I mean, my
That
goodness.
is ridiculous.
Does anyone else do as many picks as we do?
No, absolutely not.
Best bets where it's at. Both guys looking good, 8-3-1. So let's pick them. Every college game against the spread, other than the games that feature an FCS team, like Alabama playing Austin Peay. We ain't picking that one, but we're picking this one. Georgia giving 3+ touchdowns on the road at Kentucky, a team that just lost to Vanderbilt.
Vanderbilt, and they looked awful. I mean, bottom line is, they already fired Rich Scangarello, their offensive coordinator, who they brought in. Supposedly he wanted this job because he wanted to work with Will Levis, and Will Levis obviously wanted to be in an NFL system. The reality is this has been anything but that. The only thing that UK can hang their hat on is the rushing attack. Chris Rodriguez, since he's gotten back, has been the most consistent piece along with the defense for UK. This game was tough for me. It's a big number, and I didn't want to lay the points. So I went with Kentucky, and I think it's in part because they're playing at home. They will play with some pride. I do think Chris Rodriguez will be able to do enough running the football, but I worry. I think this is a dicey pick for me. I think at 49.5, I actually like the over better. I know we differ on that, Danny, but this was a tough one to pick. I don't have much hope based on how Will Levis is playing. I know he's been banged up, but the offensive line gave about 4 sacks to Vandy. I mean, they've struggled to protect him all year long.
I'm guessing nobody's ever lost to Vanderbilt and beaten the #1 team in the country in back-to-back weeks. That's just a guess.
That's a fair guess.
I haven't asked Justin Page, our researcher, that, but that's a guess.
Has anybody lost to Vanderbilt and then gone on to be the #1 overall pick in the draft? I don't know if that's happened either. It kind of boggles my mind, and that's a whole separate topic about Will Levis. I had trouble with this one too. The reason I went with the points in Kentucky in the under is I do think the one bright spot with a Mark Stoops-led team this year is the defense is at least holding its end of the bargain somewhat. And it's got to be tough for them because they're on the field the whole game. The offense is struggling so much. They're having so many 3-and-outs. They're not able to sustain drives. Other teams are pretty much imposing their will against that Kentucky offense. But I do think the defense could present some problems for this Georgia offense, at least slowing them down somewhat to keep it within that kind of 3-touchdown-ish type of game. So I think this one's clearly not one of our favorite plays for the weekend. I'm on the same side. I think Kentucky, maybe you get a senior day type of performance. Last hurrah, it's the #1 team. You hope there to be some pride, maybe hoping you pull off that upset. But ultimately, I think Georgia will pull away. But I'm very curious to see what Georgia you get. I mean, Georgia's they're already in the playoff, essentially. Right. I mean, they can do pretty much anything as long as they don't lose. And even if they lose,
and they still win the SEC championship, you're still.
Yeah, so I just wonder at what point does Kirby try to take out some starters, get guys some rest? You start looking at, potentially for next year, some young players. So all of that kind of comes in the mix for why I have Kentucky.
And the under, which is 9-1 in Kentucky games this season.
That defense pretty good.
They have not scored as expected
they run the football.
this season.
Yeah.
Tennessee and South Carolina is our next game. Tennessee is also a team sitting there right on the edge of the playoff, #5 in the country, coming off a record-setting 66 points last week.
Yeah, versus Mizzou, who actually has a pretty decent defense. And I think they've got my pick wrong, at least as far as what it looks like on the rundown. Look, to me, this game's all about optics because I think Tennessee knows in order to be able to stay in the conversation at that #5 spot of sliding into the college football playoff, they've got to blow teams out, and they should blow out South Carolina. And this is a spot where I think if you look at the rushing attack with Jalen Wright, he should be licking his chops. South Carolina's been awful at stopping the run this year. We know how good Hendon Hooker in the passing game can be. It's tough to stop Jalen Hyatt and the rest of the guys. But to me, that's where this game gets out of hand. I think they're going to be too balanced, even though they're playing on the road in South Carolina. It's a big number. I'm laying it. I think Josh Heupel knows he has to continue to impress the voters, the College Football Playoff Committee, in the event that anyone slips up. So I'm laying the 21.5 points here with the Volunteers.
I was hoping we were on the same side because I saw it on the rundown. I was like, man, Brady's thinking the same way I am. This is a hard one. I took Mizzou last week around the same number, felt pretty good for about a half, and then all of a sudden, Tennessee just shut them down. They just took off, and they're even calling timeouts late, to your point about needing style points. They got, an extra touchdown there at the end, a little bit of controversy. I hate that we even need to do that, but it is a reality of where we are in college football. I'm going to go to South Carolina and say this is one of those games. Shane Beamer he does a good job motivating his team. The team is not that talented. Spencer Rattler's been a little bit of a disaster as far as the expectations of what he was going to be at quarterback for the Gamecocks. But I do think he gets his team up, and they'll see this as a potential Super Bowl type an opportunity for them. So I'm going to say you get South Carolina's best effort. Similar to what we saw against the Mizzou game last year, I think it could be closer, and I think they're going to struggle to pull away late in that game. I think they'll probably win right in this 3 touchdowns, but I'll definitely be sweating it out.
It just doesn't bother you the way South Carolina looked versus Florida last week.
Oh, it was awful. 6 points.
And Florida's defense has been awful this year.
Yes, it absolutely does. I'm nervous.
Well, and Marshawn Lloyd, the running back, leading rusher for South Carolina, he's missed the past couple of games. Questionable right now. Don't know if he will be back for this one, but if he is back, that obviously helps their case. But as of right now, not knowing if he will play or not, I'm on the other side of this one.
It's one of those odd weeks in college football where there are a handful of SEC and ACC teams going out of conference. The LSU Tigers, one of those teams, and I love this game that they have. They're hosting UAB. Nobody's called more UAB games this season other than the voice of the Blazers than me.
Yeah,
that's right.
So why don't we get your pick?
I've called 6
what
UAB
do you got?
games.
What do you got?
And this is a good group of 5 teams.
It's a good group of 5 teams.
Good defense.
Good running
Great
game.
running back.
Wayne McBride,
Yep.
the best running backs in the country.
And that's why the line's only 14.5.
That is why the line's only 14.5. But I'm also going to lay the 14.5. Unfortunately, though, for LSU, I think they feel like they might have to make a case. With 2 losses, you win the SEC championship. We've never seen a team making the playoff with 2 losses. And maybe Brian Kelly's somewhere sitting there thinking, look, we love the momentum we've built. We've got to continue to keep this thing going. We're keeping our foot on the gas pedal. And we've got to make sure that we prepare ourselves for that scenario where we need to blow out the teams we should blow out. And this one should be an easy win for them, despite the fact that UAB is a good football team. Tough place to go play, though, so I'm laying the 14.5 points here. I think they stopped Dwayne McBride.
Tough place to play at night if it's an SEC opponent.
Right.
Wasn't that tough against Tennessee early when they got blown out? I like UAB.
There you go.
In this spot. Give me that. And I get 14 and a
So
hook.
what do we got? I got both you guys are against me here. What do we got? What's the bet?
Well, I've got UAB winning by 30. No. I have no idea how they're going to stack up against LSU, but I've seen them week in and week out. They are so much better than their record. All 5 losses by 7 points or fewer.
Right.
And they
Arkansas,
have a pretty much complete team.
without KJ Jefferson, gave this LSU team a handful. Right? I mean, last week we saw that. And UAB is not Arkansas.
But
I think this is not a hangover game, but it's a weird spot because LSU's been on this emotional run.
They're not looking ahead to anything at this point.
Oh, they better be looking ahead to Texas A&M. Watch out, Texas A&M 3-7, looking to play the role of spoiler.
Texas A&M needs to worry about their locker room.
Yes, they do. I think LSU, though, Jaden Daniels under 100 yards passing. Clearly, it doesn't matter. They're not relying on him to throw at 300 yards a game. I just think this is a tricky spot. And again, the atmosphere of what UAB views this game as, the opportunity. I think LSU, they would love to get style points, but I also think they just need to win. And I don't know if they view this as a game that they're going to feel threatened. I think UAB sees it as an opportunity. I think it's a really interesting spot for LSU, so I'll go ahead and take UAB.
I think so too. 9 o'clock Eastern time, late Saturday night. Let's move on to Ole Miss at Arkansas. Both of these teams coming off heartbreaking losses.
Heartbreaking, but I think at least in regards to Arkansas, you got to be appreciative. Sam Pittman should be of how that team played. Physical, battled it out. You played multiple quarterbacks during the course of the game. KJ Jefferson will be back for this game, though. That's a huge get for them. He's been battling that shoulder injury. He adds obviously a little bit more to the passing game, but also the ground game to go along with Raheem Sanders. I mean, that's what this game's going to be about. That's one of the reasons why I like the under better than do the spread, because I'm not really sure how each team will be able to rebound from the loss last week. But the way I've got it is I'm going to take the 2.5 points in Arkansas. I think they showed me enough that at home as a home dog, they should be able to cover that number, if not outright win it.
Does Harold Perkins Jr., who does he play for?
LSU.
He does not play for Ole Miss, right?
No, he does not.
Okay, I like the Razorbacks in this one because they don't have to face him. We've seen 2 players, JT Tuomalau for Ohio State, and then Harold Perkins Jr. last week take over games. And we haven't, that's a rare treat. It's pretty special to see those
freshmen.
For an 18-year-old, it was phenomenal. But that being aside, I do think Arkansas is one of those teams that does rely on KJ Jefferson. And they're playing, the second and third quarterback last week. they really are going to only go as far as KJ Jefferson can take them. And I think it was massive that they did rest him in that game, still played competitively. I think it's a massive boost for them to come back. And then Ole Miss, they're a little bit fraudulent when you look at the rankings that they've had. It's one of those questions like, who have they beat? And they really haven't beaten anybody. They beat Kentucky, who's fallen apart since then. That's probably their biggest signature win.
They shouldn't have won that game.
Exactly. They shouldn't have won that game. I think Jackson Dart has proven to be a little bit more of a liability in the pass game. And I think you'll see Arkansas do a pretty good job. If you're just shutting down Quinshon Judkins, I think they're going to have some success doing that. So I think this is going to be more of a defensive struggle, lower scoring game, but I like the Razorbacks to win the game outright.
So what, Ole Miss gives up a lot of yards in the ground running. I mean, Rocket Sanders and KJ Jefferson should be licking their chops right now.
And again, we're not picking the Alabama game because they're playing an FCS opponent.
I think Alabama's going to win, just to make it clear.
Money line?
Yeah.
The line, if you find it offshore, is probably somewhere around
Like
$40,000. Let's recap the SEC picks from Danny Kanell and Brady Quinn. A couple of agreements. We just heard one on Arkansas and the under. That's locked
UAB though.
There.
Keep my eye on that one.
UAB money line. How about that? LSU could lose that game. They could lose the next game, and they'd still be in the SEC championship game. Could we get a 4-loss SEC champion? Let's do it. All right, up next, we got a huge weekend in the Pac-12. Pair of top 16 matchups. USC looking to keep their playoff hopes alive against UCLA. Oh, it's going to be a fun weekend in the Pac-12 because you have maybe the 4 top teams in conference play. Washington's going to say they're in it too, but USC against UCLA. That's at the Rose Bowl. UCLA, there's going to be a sellout. They're all fired up there. They're claiming that UCLA is going to have an actual home field advantage. We'll see. We know Oregon's going to have a home field advantage against Utah, but both of those home teams, UCLA and Oregon, coming off losses. Washington, huge number at home against Colorado. Oregon State is back in the rankings as well. Let's start with that USC-UCLA game, and it appears after last weekend that USC is the last playoff hope for the conference.
Last playoff hope. I think they have to win out and win the Pac-12 in order to have that. I don't think they're going to be making it as a 2-loss champion at this point. And also, they can't afford to lose. I mean, these are elimination games when we're talking about how the teams all score off versus one another this weekend. The big thing about this matchup is, we saw the injury to Travis Dye last week. It's an absolute shame. He was a big part of their ground attack, and I think he would provide a lot more balance in a matchup where, even though UCLA has been good against the run, they still could use it. So they've got Raleek Brown, they've got Austin Jones. They do have enough depth there, I think, to be able to provide somewhat of attack, but you lose that ability of a playmaker that's really proven himself this year. This game comes down to the quarterback play, and I think when you look at the difference between DTR and Caleb Williams has just been more consistent, and his improvisational skills, like you see right here, where he's scrambling around, he's running downfield, buying time for the talented playmakers to create separation, versus a UCLA pass defense that ranks 127th in FBS. They're awful. That's the difference in the game. I'm laying the 2.5 points, although I'm not sure it'll even be that close.
Woo! I like it. I think there are 2 quarterbacks in the country who, if they were not playing quarterback for their team, it'd probably be 3 or 4 wins that would be losses. I think it's Drake May at North Carolina, and I think it's Caleb Williams at Southern Cal because of how bad the defenses are. That's the only thing that concerns me in this game is Zach Charbonnet just running roughshod over this USC defense, but I'm totally with you, Brady. I think in a high possession game, which quarterback do you trust more? DTR has kind of fallen off the last few games, and especially when they've lost. He's only had 1 passing touchdown in 2 of the last 3 games, and he's a little bit too erratic of a player for me if you're going to see a high-scoring game like this one. The only thing I disagree with you on here is just how high-scoring it's going to be. Last week I got burned on the Wake UNC, went over the massive total 77.5. I usually don't. I always see a number like that, you just go principal under. That's the one reason I'm just going under on this one. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. That's a lot of points, though.
It's a lot of points. I still took the over. By the way, I should make note of this. UCLA is not quite as bad as 127. That's another team we're going to talk about, but their pass defense has been awful this year.
Not good, not good. Let's move on to a really good Pac-12 game as well. This one is in Oregon. It's the Oregon Ducks. They just lost at home last week. It's a Utah team that is feeling great about themselves. They beat USC a few weeks ago. Winner of this game. As you said, these are kind of elimination games. Winner of this game controls their fate in the Pac-12.
Yeah, and Tavian Thomas looked like Tavian Thomas last week. Granted, versus Stanford, who struggled, but when you look at his performance on the ground, it should provide the balance that they're looking for. 180 yards, a couple touchdowns. Cam Rising had 3 through the air. That's the thing that I'm most interested to see, though, is if Bo Nix can be the Bo Nix that we were talking about a week ago, maybe in the Heisman race. Now I don't know that anything's out there for the Oregon Ducks. Definitely not the playoff with 2 losses at this point. And you're probably looking at saying he's probably not in the Heisman conversation anymore. For Cam Rising, this Utah team has flown under the radar the entire season. I think they're one of the most complete teams. They're a battle-tested team. And I trust Cam Rising to go to Eugene and not only just cover, but find a way of winning this one. That team I was talking about, that's 127th pass defense, that's Oregon. That's how bad they've been. So excuse me for the mistake earlier.
I think Cam Rising is really good. This game, to me, comes down to Bo Nix's health. Because remember, at the end of the game, was it his ankle? Was it his shoulder? Was it his head? What was the issue at the late?
He came back, though.
Right, which is why I think he'll come back, and I think he'll be fine. This is assuming that Bo Nix is healthy, and he's normal, and he's ready to play a complete game. If there's any sort of a doubt about that, I would go ahead and get off it as quick as I could, because there was a massive drop-off. We saw it when Ty Thompson came on the field. Then I would be panicked. But I also think it's about the depth at running back that Oregon has. And for the first time maybe in a few years, I don't think Utah's front 7 is quite as dominant as they've been. So I think Oregon at home will be able to establish the run game. And I do think they'll be able to pressure Cam Rising somewhat in this one. So I like the Ducks to win.
Had that long home winning streak, 23 straight home wins until last week. Might they lose 2 straight? Let's move on to a team that's not going to lose at home. That would be the Washington Huskies. The line is 31. Washington up to 17th, and Jerry Palm in his latest bowl projections has them in the New Year's 6.
Yeah, no, I mean, they've got another team that's flown under the radar. We don't give enough credit to the Pac-12 teams this year. Washington's been a battle-tested team. Michael Penix leading the country in passing. He's been prolific through the air. The defense is better than a lot of people realize. Colorado's just in a bad spot. It's a big number here on precedent. Most people don't like to lay it. I'm going to lay it. To me, I look at it, I say it's a tough place to go play too. So that's all that stuff combines in this, and that New Year's 6 is still out there. And I think that's meaningful to Kalen DeBoer and the rest of his staff in this team.
I'm with you. It's a massive number, but I'll go ahead and lay those points and say, Colorado, you got to show me something you haven't shown all season long, and that's be a team that's going to put up some fight and going to be able to cover this number. We saw them against USC. USC was able to score late to hit a couple of the numbers, key numbers there in that game, the over and to actually cover. I think Washington does it too. Michael Penix made himself a boatload of money. I think not top 5 money, but I thought he showcased a skill set that can work at the next level. He's leading the country in passing yardage. Been really impressed with what he's done with Kalen DeBoer, so I'll go ahead and lay him.
One more Pac-12 game to pick. It's a new team in the top 25, a team that's been there before this season, but Oregon State is back in at number 23. They have 3 losses this season, and all of them are to ranked Pac-12 teams, and they're only giving 8 here at Arizona State.
Yeah, look, their defense hasn't been great on the road this year. So I think that's one of the concerns, too. And Arizona State's been kind of playing better as they've made some changes on their side as well. This one is one of the inconsequential matchups in the Pac-12. It's one where I don't know how far apart these two teams are. Arizona State's kind of had its moments through the season. So I'll take the 8 points. I think it should be a close matchup between these two and the home underdog. I don't think Arizona State wins, but I think it's closer than Oregon State would like it to be.
I'm with you. The Pac-12 is showcasing a lot of depth. 6 teams in the top 25.
Depth at the top, though, right? I mean,
and depth across, though. I think overall,
so?
yeah,
all the way down to the bottom.
No, not the very, very bottom. But I think of these two, like not Colorado and not Cal, but like I think Arizona State's like in the middle tier, and I think Oregon State is just above the middle tier. I don't trust them enough to lay 8. Like if it was 3, I'd say, yeah, sure. But with 8, it's just too many for me to trust there. So I'll play the parity of the Pac-12.
Huge week in the Pac-12. We might know who's going to show up in the Pac-12 championship game after all is said and done this week. Let's recap the picks from Danny and Brady. They both like USC, -2.5. Both on Washington, laying a big number there, 31 points against Colorado, and Arizona State as well. Up next, we head to the Big Ten. One last tune-up before the big game for Michigan and Ohio State. Big Ten is Michigan and Ohio State and everybody else. Penn State has beaten everybody else. That's why they are number 11 in the country, but no ranked wins. They're against Rutgers. Michigan and Ohio State catching big numbers there. in games that they should win easily heading into their big-time matchup next week. Should be a pair of 11-0 teams. Brady Quinn and Danny Kanell are going to pick it for us. Let's start with Ohio State, number 2 in the land, minus 27.5 at Maryland. These teams have played 7 times. 4 of the 7 times, Ohio State scored 60+.
Yeah.
It's heading that way again, isn't it?
I'm not going to go that far. I think actually Maryland's been more competitive this season. You got to give them credit too offensively. I think the way Taulia Tagovailoa has played, he hasn't played good the past couple of games. He's been held under 100 yards. But before that, they were dispersing the football. They've got, in my opinion, 3-4 NFL caliber wide receivers. Raheem Jarrett starts off that group. Jones as well, Copeland. All those guys are probably going to be playing at the next level. And Roman Hemby, he can run the football. They actually have a little more balance than people want to give them credit. So this is a game where I think maybe Ohio State gets caught looking ahead a little bit. There's also some injuries to the running back position, even though that wasn't an issue last week as they rushed for 340 yards versus Indiana. I do think it'll be a little more difficult on the road versus Maryland. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the 27.5 points in Maryland. It might be a nail-biter when it's all said and done, but I do think there's also the opportunity for the backdoor cover with Taulia Tagovailoa, depending on where the game ends up down the stretch with his ability to throw the football.
Last week you nailed it. Penn State, Maryland, they crushed them 30-0. I'm going to ride you again on the Maryland pick because I'm on the same side. Hopefully you got a good beat for that one. I think all the points you kind of hit on there. I think if you look at Ohio State's secondary, I think they could be hit for some big plays. I think Maryland will capitalize on that. And if there's any team that doesn't need style points, it's the Ohio State Buckeyes. So they don't have any need or necessity to go out there and try to score points late. I do think Maryland late in this game does push the over as well as the cover with the 27.5 points. So that's the only thing we're different on. But that's a big number here at this point. And especially looking ahead, you want everybody healthy for the biggest game of the season coming up in the game. So I think the tendency will be for them to get their starters out, get them rested, start looking forward as soon as they can. Get Caleb Williams his stats, or excuse me, Bryce Young his stats, and then start moving on.
You had Xavier Johnson, a wide receiver at running back last week. That's how thin they are right now.
I was going through the cycle of quarterbacks that are in the Heisman. Yeah, C.J. Stroud will get his Heisman stats, and then they'll be on.
Let's move on to another huge line here. It's Michigan against Illinois, and an Illinois team that still could end up in the Big Ten championship game despite their back-to-back losses.
To me, this game really all depends on Chase Brown and the health of Chase Brown, who's been extremely productive, one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. However, he did leave last week with a leg injury, so his status is up in the air at this point. But this has also been an Illinois team that's very stingy defensively. I think Brett Bielema is going to load up the box and say, make J.J. McCarthy beat us. We're not going to let Blake Corum or Donovan Edwards beat us in the ground attack. Easier said than done. Penn State tried doing that, and Michigan just ran the football down their throats. But I think Illinois is ready for this one. By the way, Tommy DeVito hadn't been bad either for Illinois, throwing the football around. So I think Illinois might keep this one tight. I'm going to take the points here.
2 of the top 3 defenses in the country. But as you mentioned, Michigan has had an answer. They ran over Iowa.
I'm on the other side. I think Michigan needs the style points. I think they're taking this kind of more, they're getting tired of hearing about their non-conference schedule, how weak their schedule is. The one thing they've been and one thing they can hang their hat on is game control. I think they absolutely roll through Illinois. I think Illinois is a little bit of a wounded duck here coming into this game, and I think Michigan realizes it and takes advantage of it.
Now, the West, which team would give Michigan or Ohio State the best game in the championship game? Of those teams, nobody, right?
No one. I mean, there's no one. There's such a discrepancy between the Big Ten East. I'll go as far as saying Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. And I don't think anyone in the West really gives them much of a battle.
I would agree with that. Penn State is up next. They are given 19 at Rutgers. Penn State was not able to beat Ohio State or Michigan, but against everybody else, they're taking care of business and putting up big numbers for the most part.
Yeah, and they'll win this game. There's no doubt about it. They will win this game. It's just whether or not they're able to cover that number. That number's a little big to me on the road to Rutgers. Kind of I'm not going to say a sleepy place, but not the easiest place to go play. Gavin Wimsatt is coming off his best game of the season at quarterback for Rutgers. He's obviously their backup. Even though it was in a loss to Michigan State, he's played well. And Kyle Monaghan at the running back position has been able to kind of provide some balance there too. Defensively, they're kind of a middle-of-the-road defense. I think they can hang around in this game. I think this is one of those where Greg Schiano shows you who he kind of is as a defensive mind and keeps this one close. So I'm taking the points.
They hung around against Michigan. Remember that?
Yeah.
Half.
Yeah.
Still lost by 100.
The birthplace of college football, Piscataway, New Jersey.
Yeah, the home of Zubin Mehenti.
Yeah, exactly. It is. I'm going to say that Rutgers gets the cover as well. I think Penn State's going to win this game by 14 or 17. I think it's a big number. And I totally agree with you. Greg Schiano, similar, we were talking about the SEC with Shane Beamer in South Carolina, like certain games you get up for a little bit more home opportunity for here potentially to keep this one, make it interesting, and I think they do.
All right, recapping the Big Ten picks for Brady and Danny here as we head toward that rivalry weekend in college football where we'll get Ohio State and Michigan. You guys are thinking Ohio State might be looking ahead just a little bit, or at least not needing style points like a Michigan does. So they like Maryland plus 27.5 and also Rutgers plus 19 against Penn State. We'll head to the ACC next. Clemson. Some would say still with an outside chance of having an opportunity in the college football playoff. First things first, they're laying 3 touchdowns against Miami. All right, we got ACC ranked teams, and we're throwing Notre Dame in there too. They're an honorary ACC team. Notre Dame's at home against Boston College. Florida State's just rolling right now.
They wish.
They're out of conference. Clemson, Miami. Boy, we thought that would be a good game. Probably not now. And North Carolina looking to stay perfect in conference play as well. Let's pick them. Let's get through it. Miami, Clemson with Brady, Quinn, and Danny Kanell. Miami coming off the most points they've scored all season. They put 35 on Georgia Tech last week.
Yeah, Ja'Cory Brown, the freshman, started at quarterback for him. Dual threat quarterback. Did a little bit through the air. Was pretty efficient. Ran pretty well. Jalen Knighton was a part of that rushing attack. This is a different challenge, though. Clemson's still playing for everything, and that's even including an ACC championship and potentially a college football playoff berth. I just don't see it as a good matchup. I think that defensive front's going to get after Ja'Cory Brown. He's going to receive a lot of pressure from that group, and it's going to be a rude awakening on the road. So I'm going to go ahead and lay the points.
Clemson last week had one of the ugliest wins and covers against Louisville. It just wasn't the prettiest, but it did, and it was pretty impressive, and they got back on track what they needed to do. What's been ugly is what's transpired in Coral Gables this year. I mean, the first year of Mario Cristobal has just been a complete mess. Thankfully, kind of avoided a complete disaster by beating Georgia Tech, but they lost to the rival Florida State 45-3. I think there's a talent gap there. Mario Cristobal today was calling out some parents who were going after assistant coaches on social media and said, hey, if you don't want your kid to play here, come pick him up. It is a mess. I wonder where this team is mentally, since I don't know where they are, but I do know where Clemson is. Clemson is kind of riding this, hey, nobody thinks we can make this. Nobody thinks we can make the playoff. They still are very much in the playoff hunt. If they win out, they'll put themselves back in that conversation. So I think they'll win and cover the number 2.
North Carolina hopes that they're in that discussion as well. They also have one loss to Notre Dame, and this is the first time all season they've been a double-digit favorite.
Well, and they've got to win by double digits. To me, this is the team that if anyone needs to win convincingly the most, it's UNC. They do have such a soft schedule, and if you look at the rest of the way, they need to win and win convincingly. And then maybe it helps, too, for Drake May for his Heisman campaign, which I don't know why he's not getting more love. This kid is everything. Throwing the football, running the football, he leads them in rushing. He is an incredible talent. I'm excited to watch him for the rest of his college career because he's such a young player. But their defense is awful. And so I feel a little torn or conflicted about laying all these points. But like I said, I think they're going to need to. And Georgia Tech is now down to their third-string quarterback in Zach Pyron, who played a little bit last week, but he's a freshman. Maybe this ends up being tough for him to get things going, even as bad as UNC's been.
I feel more than confident that UNC and Drake May are going to put up a ton of points offensively. I have almost zero confidence that they're going to be able to go out there and hold Georgia Tech under 14 points, 21 points. I don't trust the defense. I think this is a massive number. I think it's too big. I think UNC wins, but I don't know if they're capable of getting the style points. I just don't. Their defense is a liability, and as much as they need it, it's just not who they are. They're winning tight games. I don't think this game would be tight, but I got to see that defense step up. And they need it for the resume coming down the stretch. Yeah. They desperately need the defense to step up and say, this Georgia Tech isn't very good. We'll hold them to single digits, and you have a nice, comfortable win. This team doesn't win comfortably.
They're the worst in the ACC.
Yeah.
And they're obviously
one of the worst in the country.
One of the worst in the country. Yeah.
Let's move on to Notre Dame. Team that beat North Carolina, that beat Clemson. It's the same line here, 21 points. Notre Dame 0-5 against the spread as a double-digit favorite this season.
Yeah, but the tighter games, they've played well and they've covered it. It's been kind of a weird year for them, though. This one, playing at home, though, they started to find their identity. I think they're going to be able to run the football effectively. We've seen that. They got the passing game going last week versus Navy. Talked to you guys kind of about how bad the pass defense was for Navy. Thought that might be the plan. This one's different, though. Phil Dracovic, their quarterback at BC, he's been injured. He's questionable at this point. I don't know that he will be able to make it back. He was formerly at Notre Dame. Remember, he left. He didn't have a great relationship with Chip Long. If he plays, you wonder if there's maybe a little bit of that revenge factor. He obviously gives them a shot. But I'm going to lay the points here with Notre Dame. I think they've got a better idea of what their identity is. They've been more consistent, I would say, to that degree, too, running the football and playing good defense.
BC comes in with a ton of confidence, ton of momentum. Emmett Moorhead, the young freshman quarterback, it's a signature win against NC State, who is still in the top 25 somehow. Boo Corrigan, the guy that's making the decision. He's their athletic director at NC State. But I think all that momentum comes to a crash. Notre Dame, they're starting to find their identity. They're starting to not panic when they get late in games. Navy tries to make a comeback. They're able to pull away. It doesn't matter. The style points don't matter, but I think they get them. BC just I don't think is going to be able to slow down the run game, and I don't think they're going to be able to do much versus this defense. So I'll take Notre Dame and lay the points.
Some would say that no team in the country is playing better than our next team.
Ooh.
Florida State.
Who would be
that guy right there?
That guy.
And Noah, our producer.
That's right.
Went to Florida
Smartest
State.
guy in the room.
I mean, they're blowing out folks right now, and they're looking to sweep the state of Louisiana this year.
Yes, they are, despite what our guy Emery says, who actually likes the Raging Cajuns in this one. I think Florida State wins, but I do think this will be a game where you see the defense step up. And I think much like we've talked about in a lot of our games, with big games coming up, the Florida game coming up on a short week this week because it's Friday after Thanksgiving as opposed to Saturday, I think you'll see Mike Norvell start to pull out some of his guys later in the game. They don't need style points. They're not in that conversation. So I think you'll see the defense step up, lower scoring game. Louisiana maybe gets 10 points in this one to keep it within that number. But I think Florida State wins comfortably. That's a massive number for Florida State.
Did you flip that pick?
You're taking the points in
Yeah, I have Louisiana.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Everything you said there.
I sounded like you were voting for Florida State.
No, I was calm. I mean, it's no team is playing as good as Florida State is right
I
here.
like the under the best. Not sure what to expect out of really either team. I mean, Florida State is playing some good football right now. They should be able to take advantage here. But I'm going to go ahead and I'll take the 24 points. I just think that's still a big number for Florida State to cover, even as good as they've been playing at home. The under, to me, is the best play. Danny
mentioned it. NC State is, for some reason, still ranked in the playoff poll, number 24. They're at Louisville, and the Cardinals are giving 4 to NC State.
Yeah, we don't know whether or not Malik Cunningham's playing or not. He left last week with an injury. If he's not playing, all right, that makes this a lot easier for me to take the 4 points to NC State, which I'm going to do anyway because I just think it's a better matchup. Looking at the defense, the way they played this year, MJ Morris has done a good job too since he's filled in for Devin Leary. So I'm going to take the 4 points. I think the spread's a little bit too big based on what I saw from Louisville last week. I mean, it was ugly. I know Clemson won ugly, but it ended up being a game where I thought it'd be a lot closer than it ended up being in the end.
I'm going to go ahead and take Louisville, assuming Malik Cunningham is going to play. I think the number tells you he's going to play. I mean, I know there's some uncertainty. If there's a last minute, he can't go, you try to pull that one off the table, I would not advise taking this one. But NC State is kind of struggling here. They did lose to BC, and Scott Satterfield, the head coach of Louisville, I think you have to give some credit for him. After the way the season started and the way last year went, you kind of were worried about what the future held from him. This team has been a tough out in the ACC, and I think they'll get a signature win here. And I think this is the last time you'll see NC State in the top 25 too.
All right, picking the ACC games here and Notre Dame. Danny and Brady, let's show you how they picked and what they picked and who they picked. Clemson minus 19 is the pick, and the over 48. Lock unity on that one. They also like Notre Dame minus 21. Louisiana, lock unity, plus 24, and the under 52. And Danny, no over-under for Louisville?
I said over.
Over! So they both like the over 45 in that game. All right, we got the Big 12 to go. And TCU with another test. Will Baylor put an end to their unbeaten run? The line is less than a field goal. All right, looking at the Big 12 ranked matchups. TCU, it's only a 2.5-point spread at Baylor. Brady's going to be there. Kansas State, likely going to be that opponent for TCU in the Big 12 championship game. They can take care of West Virginia. And Oklahoma State is ranked again. That's Bedlam against Oklahoma. All right, Brady Quinn, Danny Kanell, TCU Baylor. This kind of reminds me of that LSU Arkansas line of 3 last week with LSU coming off that big win, and that game went right down to the wire. You're going to be there.
I am going to be there, and I think if you are a TCU fan, you are concerned about the defense of Baylor, which has been good this year. Richard Reese has been one of the better running backs, too, in the Big 12, and I think that's how they kind of hang around in this one if TCU lays an egg. But TCU has a head coach named Sonny Dykes, and he is known as the cover king. So I'll lay the 2.5 points here. I think they showed a lot of physicality. They showed what their defense was capable of last week on the road versus Texas. And to go along with that, you've got Kendre Miller in the backfield, one of the best running backs, not only in the Big 12, but college football, and Max Duggan, who continually distributes the football and plays well. So I think the dream for making the playoffs stays alive.
I hope you're right. I think you're wrong, though. Baylor's coming off their worst performance of the year. It was ugly. Got absolutely drubbed, 31-3. Blake Shapen had 2 interceptions, 0 touchdowns.
Hasn't played well of late.
I don't think Max Duggan has either. He's played okay, but he was on fire earlier this season. And I think the issue is going to be Kendre Miller will not be able to run the ball against this Dave Aranda-led defense, which is one of the more potent defenses against the run. I hope I'm wrong because I love the story, and maybe I'll make a promise to you right here. I will not doubt them again. But I'm going to go ahead and take Baylor and say they win.
Win outright.
Yeah.
Bet against the cover king.
I know. And I love Max Duggan.
He will on 4th and 1 throw a fade to get that cover.
Yes, he will. I think he might even call timeout before.
They will likely see Kansas State in the Big 12 championship game if Kansas State can take care of business. They've got West Virginia this week. Then they have Kansas, and they're given 7.5 in Morgantown.
You know, I've completely underestimated Kansas State every single week. I've been off every time I've picked them.
They're a tough team to pick.
Last week, though, I thought West Virginia would play Oklahoma tough. They did pull off the upset. I think now West Virginia has the feeling of a little hangover game. That was a big win for their program. In the past week, their athletic director's been fired. You kind of wonder maybe what the status is for Neil Brown. Too many questions for me. I'm going to lay the 7.5 points here in Kansas State. I think they continue to build towards a Big 12 championship berth.
Morgantown, one of the tougher places to play in the Big 12. You got to travel to the East Coast. It's a little bit awkward for them to have to go across a couple time zones. I think and again, kind of one of the philosophies in the Big 12 this year for me has been if it's over a touchdown, take the points, especially for a home team here. I think Kansas State wins. I think they can smell what's right coming down the road. I think West Virginia gives them a handful. I'll say it's a tighter game.
They gave TCU all they could handle when they came in a few weeks ago. One more ranked team, that's Oklahoma State. They're back into the rankings after a victory over Iowa State. The big news in that game was Spencer Sanders came back and looked good.
Yeah, coming off the bench, he's been dealing with a banged-up shoulder. It makes you wonder, all right, is he going to start for this matchup? I would assume so based on how he played and how he finished. But on the flip side, you know, Oklahoma coming off a disappointing loss, they get to come home now. 7.5-point favorite. This line looked off to me, but the fact is Oklahoma's a better team at home. The way they've run the football, but in particular Dylan Gabriel. He's taken on the worst pass defense in the Big 12 in Oklahoma State, so I'm laying the 7.5 points. Something seems off for me, and I also like this one as a high-scoring affair. Take the over.
This line stinks. You got the ranked team. It is a rivalry game, though. Again, same philosophy. A touchdown is too many in this rivalry game. I think Spencer Sanders does play, which to me will be the difference in this one. So I'll go ahead and take the full touchdown. You talk about a team, though, that needs desperately to win this game. It's Brent Venables playing at home. Can you imagine the boos that'll be coming if they potentially lose this game? That would be a horrible way to kind of come down the home stretch for the Sooners. But I think Oklahoma State keeps it within that 7.5.
I would send them to 5-6 on the season, and they still wouldn't be bowl eligible if they lose that one. All right, recapping the picks once again in the Big 12, and no agreement. That's it.
Somebody's moving.
Except on that total in the Kansas State-West Virginia game. They like the under 55. All right. We got a group of 5 automatic berth to sort out this year. It's likely coming from the American, handful of ranked teams all fighting for that bid. 3 American Conference teams in there ranked from 21 to 25. Tulane coming off the loss last week at home to SMU. UCF now the highest ranked group of 5 team at number 20. They're at home against Navy. And Cincinnati is at Temple. Danny Kanell, Brady, Quinn, picking them here. Let's start with that UCF game. Navy is 5-0 against the spread as a double-digit dog. And they notched another one against Notre Dame last week in a 3-point defeat.
Yep, lost the game, though, and really got dominated in that first half. It was a tale of 2 halves, and I think you're probably looking at saying Notre Dame, with some miscues in particular on offense more than anything else. I think that was probably their best shot, too. I think this is a tough one on the road, taking on a UCF team that rushed for over 330 yards last week versus Tulane, which is a really good defense. Now, I know Navy is good against the run, but Gus Malzahn's the type of coach that I think could dial some stuff up, make some things happen with the personnel they have. So it's a big number, but I'm going to lay the 16.5 here. I think UCF does a lot of scoring. My only concern, Danny, is the over-under. I've got the under. I could see Navy doing a fair amount of scoring this one, too.
I could, too. I love John Rice Plumlee is like the perfect quarterback for Gus Malzahn's system. He's healthy now. He's back running the ball as a former wide receiver at Ole Miss. You see the athleticism. You see what he's able to do. I also love Travis Williams, the defensive coordinator at UCF. I think he'll have this team ready and prepared, even on a week, to shut down or at least hold in check Navy's triple option attack. So I like the Knights as well.
UCF fans not happy that they only moved up one spot after that top 20 win against Tulane. The Green Wave's still in position. If they can win out, still in position potentially to get that AAC championship and that group of 5 auto bid to the New Year's Six. They're at home against SMU.
Yeah, tough stretch of games. SMU this week, Cincinnati next week. It will really determine a lot as far as what the AAC is going to look like in the championship game. But this is one where I just kind of look at SMU right now and the way they're playing. I think they're capable, based on what Tulane gave up in the rushing game. SMU has the ability, too, with Kamar Wheaton and Tyler Levine. Both those guys are capable enough of running the football and doing what we saw from UCF last week versus them. So I think this game's going to be close. I think it might even come down to the final possession. Tulane's defense has been solid this year, but this will be a tough challenge. So I'm going to go ahead and take the 3 points.
Rhett Lashley's done a pretty good job. Inherited a really good program that Sonny Dykes left behind. I think this team is pretty talented. I don't like to use the word fraudulent, but Tulane, as they've faced tougher competition, has definitely struggled. I think that trend will continue, so I like the Mustangs as well.
That's the thing. You look at a 6-4 record for SMU. They've lost 3 of the 4 by 1 scores. Like, they've played a lot of tight games, too, this year.
Let's make some stops on defense for once, if you're an SMU fan, right? Cincinnati is at Temple. Cincy is minus 17 in this game. They're back into the rankings after that win on Nip at Night last week.
Yeah, and look, and they're taking on a Temple team that a lot of people don't know. E.J. Warner, they should. He's really good. He's a freshman quarterback. He's coming off his best performance last week. I think he could give Cincinnati some issues, but Cincinnati's just overall a better team. This is one where I'm laying the points, but I do think there's going to be a fair amount of scoring. For 51 is the over-under. That might be my favorite play. Take the over here. Both these teams, by the way, can pressure. They both have good defensive fronts. But I think at the end of the day, it'll hit the over, but Cincinnati will cover.
It feels like we've forgotten about Cincinnati somewhat after they've been in the playoff conversation for the last couple years, but they haven't gone anywhere. Still a very disciplined team, maybe some new faces, but Luke Fickell has this team playing as well as anybody. I think they're still kind of in this conversation, too, for a New Year's Six. If they want to keep that going, they've got to win impressively, and I think they do.
All right, 3 American Conference ranked teams in action, all playing separate games as we look to sort out this conference in the group of 5 automatic berth. And it's agreement across the board, UCF, SMU, and Cincinnati. Time for the best bets from Brady and Danny, and Brady is sticking right there in the American Conference for your pick.
We just talked about it, SMU versus Tulane. If you look at Tulane so far this season, they're averaging over 30 points per game. SMU averaging 40 points per game. They scored 77 points a couple weeks ago. These teams can score. The over is my best bet of this week.
I'm going to go to the ACC and the Clemson-Miami game, where Clemson is a 19-point favorite. I think they win and cover in this one. I just think Miami's a little bit of a mess right now. You don't know what is happening across the roster. And Clemson, as much as we've written them off from the playoff conversation, I think they're still in a pretty good position. They'll have some chances here late to put up some resume builders. And if they beat North Carolina, that could potentially be a top 10 win, maybe, if North Carolina wins out. I think Clemson's kind of laying exactly where they need to be. They need the style points. I think they get them against Miami. And
if everything goes the way you think it goes, there's going to be another open spot in the top 4. You think Baylor's going to beat TCU and hand them their first loss of the season. For Danny Kanell and Brady Quinn, I'm Chris Hassel. These are your college football picks. We only have 2 regular season weeks to go.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.